Okay, I want to talk a little bit with Juan about what we had talked about this afternoon and this evening. So here we go. And this is a recap of our pretty lengthy discussion about many different aspects of the bas relief for the Rose Bowl. The first one is we are pretty much clayed up at this point, and we're putting final touches to, we're finessing the figures. One of the things that we talked about was that we want to get the figure on the left, which he's starting to do now, really lunging towards us and give the dynamics that are present in both the activity of football and in the poster and in the feeling that we're all trying to get in terms of animation and energy. We have made the ball a little bit smaller. You can see hands now that look a little bit larger than they are life size, so we can begin to trim down and get some nice shapes. And to that end, we also have a bunch of bumps and lumps and probably overstated bulbous looking clay put on there. So once again, we can cut back into it and make some really good wrinkles and folds and have the feeling of the figure. We talked about taking out the arm of the back player, which is in this case the fullback, so that we can get a nicer, cleaner look at the profile of the quarterback, because as it is right now, it's rather clumsy, and from a lower point of view, it kind of is not doing much aesthetically, and from a player's point of view, that arm could be hidden behind the quarterback pretty comfortably. We talked about taking the hand of this player on the far right out from underneath, or I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's popping through somewhere. Maybe it's on the shoulder.
It's above the shoulder, yes.
It's on the shoulder of this guy. We talked about taking it out too, because from where it is, it's going to look like a lump of stuff that's collected on that back, on the full back shoulder, and I don't think that's real good. It just doesn't look that great. And the other hand, which appears up under the arm over here, is not exactly good. On a big scale like this, and especially, you can see it in Mount Rushmore or other kinds of larger scale pieces, what you want to get across and what you want to convey to all the viewers is the dynamics of the piece, but you don't want to clutter it with things that just aren't necessary, and I feel that both of those two hands are not necessary. It was pointed out by Juan, and I think it's very true, that this arm is kind of flying up in the air too high, and we're gonna cut off a little of the shoulder and make that arm go behind the fullback. That's the halfback over here. His arm is going to go back behind the fullback and not be so vertical in terms of where it is now. It's going to be brought down a little bit. But the reason it was done that way, and I can explain aesthetically, that one of the things that happens is there's a really nice slant behind his head. I like the idea of a slant. I just don't like, I'm agreeing with everybody that that arm is up in the air too high. Mm-hmm. So we're going to kind of come to a beautiful conclusion to that.
Great.
That's one of the things that we're going to try to do. I'll just talk about the roses for a second. Yep. They are rather bulbous looking, and we look at the beauty and the delicacy of a rose. And one of the things that's going to happen is, and you can see it a little bit in the leaves starting to happen up in here in this area, we're going to get a little thinner edge to some of the petals of the roses and to some of the leaves. And right now the stem of the roses looks like a hose going behind there. Well, we're going to make it a little thinner and a little thicker, and the branch articulation to the leaves. The leaves have a little stem of their own, and almost all clustered leaves up by the rose bud and the bulb of the flower is in triplicate. There are threes. There are some solo leaves up there, but we're going to have a lot of people coming to the Rose Bowl that know a lot about roses. And what we want to do is try and make that become a more accurate sort of horticultural concept. I'm not sure that that's the right term, but we're trying to get some authenticity to the look of the flowers, and I think we're getting there pretty nicely.
Yeah.
Not to mention, we're trying to get some authenticity to the look of the football players too, which are projecting out a little bit further, show a lot more action, and have a nicer sort of energy to them, as I mentioned. I want to look over here. We can look at this hand right here, which is too bulbous right now. Once again, we are going to trim them down. The faces right now are real roughed in. They don't have a sense of a person yet, other than just the basics that are there. And we want to get the helmets to fit just a little bit better on their heads. These are leather helmets, and they, unlike the contemporary player, the leather helmets kind of clung to their heads just a little bit more. And we love the idea of playing with seams and belts and wrinkles, because all of these things add to both the authenticity of the time and the idea of the aesthetic movements that can go through. It's getting a little dark for the video, but I think it's still going okay. It should be.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, good. We talked about the ellipse of the top of the stadium, and it was made on a CNC machine all the way across, so that we got a really nice clean ellipse at the top. And we also talked about the line across the bottom, and we all made a determination, that is to say my team and I think Juan is agreeing with this, that there should be a lesser but mild ellipse to that too. It just shouldn't cut straight across. Regarding the seams and cutting across, some of the players, and I'm gonna look at this, the top of this player's head over here. I'm pointing at it with a fishing pole. I don't know if it's coming out or not, but I hope it is, because the top of this player's head will kind of, and there's a seam that goes in the sculpture division. There's a seam that goes right behind his head, but the head itself will be cast in the middle panel, and the seam itself will go behind the player's head. And I'm thinking that's going to be taking place in many, many areas of this. So I'd like to make an aesthetic comment that I hope is a possibility. I would like all of the seams to have not an absolute sharp distinction, but have a just slightly changed off of a real crisp, sharp line to a more organic division line, and that will enable the organics of the piece to be complemented very nicely by the framework and the bronze plaques that are very geometric all the way around it, but more purposefully, that will allow the seams everywhere to kind of be a lost and found kind of quality in the piece. For instance, when I look over here at the knee of this player, the line can come into it, but part of the upper section can slightly overlap part of the bottom section, so that you really don't see a line that cuts through there. You see more or less a kind of, well, you don't see anything actually. You won't see anything there.
Right.
But if the line in between is so straight, it's going to just point like an arrow to these places where there are these divisions. But if the line that goes in between has a little bit of an organic movement to it, and I don't know how to explain it other than show you at the site, if it has that quality to it, it will keep with the quality of the entire piece. That is to say, it won't be a rigid geometric line cut through it, but it'll keep with the flow of the jerseys and the pants and the arcing of the roses and the kind of fluidity of the rose petals themselves, with the leaves at that as an important factor in the development of everything. So this organic quality will be kept consistent with the division lines. Regarding the grass, we're going to tip the shoes a little bit more towards the, so we see more of the top of the shoes, so we can illustrate that turf, that lawn that's underneath the players a little more convincingly. Since we have no slope to it, it has to be kept flat. We can't slope it out three-dimensionally, so we have to do it illusionistically. And Joan and I talked about how to do that with some vertical as well as horizontal movements in it, so it really has a feeling of turf. And then the other thing is that we talked about, and this is kind of still up in the air, is to give a slight illusion of where the chalk lines are, because after all, they are running across the lines trying to make a first down or get down the field or whatever. They're not, the lines don't move behind them diagonally. They're just coming, they're crossing the lines at a sort of a perpendicular direction, so to speak. And the final thing is, if in looking at the grandstands, and we'll have these nice ellipses at the top and the bottom, if you look at the grandstands, they're completely empty. And if there's activity and things going on in the stadium and these guys are out there playing football, it is rather not a good idea for the grandstands to be empty. And we want to kind of give an illusion of a filled grandstand watching these players play. That is, I think, an important, not only visual factor, I think it's an important psychological factor as well. So that's a bit of the review of what we talked about. We went into great details with many different things and certain elements of the piece, but I just hit the top, I don't know how many there were, but I hit the more important issues, and I just wanted to get those points across.